Hello everyone, and welcome to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters across the franchised and independent dealer sectors.
Hello and welcome to this special Motor Trade Radio industry interview show. Today's guest is Peter Waddell, a familiar name to many listeners. He's the founder and CEO of Big Motoring World, one of the most successful independent car supermarkets operating in the UK. The business was founded by Peter back in 1986, initially trading cars from his home until he bought the Tainham Trade Centre, a 20-car pitch in a small Kent village. In 1997, the business relocated to a 60-car site in Bapchild near Sittingbourne in Kent and was renamed as Bapchild Motoring World. After further expansion in 2004, Peter consolidated his three small sites in Kent into a single location in West Malling with space for 150 cars and rebranded the operation as Big Motoring World. Under Peter's leadership, the business has since grown into a network of 6 large retail supermarket sites in Kent, North London and Peterborough, with a new site opening at the end of April in Wimbledon, which will be big enough to hold 1,400 cars. So welcome to the podcast, Peter. That's a busy track record by anyone's standards, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's been a fantastic journey. You know, people talk about this trade. This is one of the best trades in the world for me.
Yep.
And I'm very passionate about our trade, and you will see, many people will see my LinkedIn, where we talk very openly about this trade. This trade is not broken. This trade is one of the best trades in the world, and I'm very proud to be part of that sector.
And, you know, I think, to be fair, Peter, before we get into some of the questions, I think, you know, you're an integral part of this industry, and I think it'll be a different industry without having you in it, in fairness. So, you know, it's great to have you in this sector, and I've been in this sector a long time, and I know you've been a part of it for a long time as well. So before we get into talking about Big Motoring World, I think it's fair to say that, you know, for the listeners that will be listening to us this morning, that you know, we'd start at the beginning in terms of, you know, Peter and who you are and where you came from, because I know through me knowing you for so long, you know, your humble beginnings. You know, you're saying that you were brought up in a children's care home and really lived as I think you describe it as a tramp for some time. Just, you know, this is fascinating in terms of where you've come from. And I think for the listeners need to hear this from humble beginnings. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what now it looks like when you're looking back at some of this?
Okay. So if you take my life is a different story to most people's life. I was in a home since I was 4. I was taken into care. My mother beat me up in a severe way, but it mentally and harmfully scarred me. We was in a home, in a special home down in Largs, a place called Quarriers Homes. I was brought up by a man called Eric McBay. Eric McBay last year was in Montenegro. He was a guest of mine. We flew him in by private charter. The people in the home who had worked hard with me for many years, and we took him on my super yacht in Montenegro. This man brought me up as a house parent, and I still keep in contact with him today. So thank you to Eric McBay. And we then left the home, and in the old days, you were treated as an adult at 16, and although you wasn't an adult, there's no person in this world at 16 is an adult. And usually what happens to these people that come out of the home, they're put in a bed sit, and the council give you X amount of pounds for your rent and a bit of money to live off. You end up spending that money and you end up in the streets or in the army or in prison. And that's usually the 3 ways people go, and anybody out there that's been in a home will realise what I'm saying. I ended up in the streets. I was in Buchanan bus station as a tramp, and it got so cold one day that the bus left its back door open where they put the luggage, and I jumped into there. Needless to say, I ended up in London and in Victoria bus station. And I walked and walked and walked, and I ended up at a taxi office in Peckham, where they said to me, we'll teach you to drive. And I ended up there as a taxi driver. And I started then saving my money up, and they used to rent taxis to the drivers. And at them times, it was a Cavalier and several Mark III Catinas. And probably a lot of people won't know what they are.
Unfortunately, I'm old enough from Curtis's to
You
remember them. Yeah, we are.
We remember them, sadly.
Yes, and from there we started renting out taxis to the drivers, and in the end, I got that busy that I was selling these cars quite frequently, and I thought, this is quite easy. I'm not saying this trade's easy at all, but at the time, from what I'd grown up so far to selling a car or two was quite easy. So we went into selling cars, and we started selling cars from home. I met a girl from Kent, so we moved down to Kent, and we had a little house there, and we were selling cars in the house. And we sort of went from there, and then we ended up in Tenham, which was a little site of 20 cars. And that was the start of us from today.
I mean, that Peter, thanks for providing that background. That's an incredible story. So you ended up in Tenham back in 1986. How did you form the business, from there, and how did you develop it from there?
Well, it's quite funny. We sold all our cars from the taxis, and I never forget these figures. At £147,000, okay, and we got a mortgage on the site, and that left me about 7. I mean, these are small numbers then, but to me, it was all I had in my life. And we ended up with 79,000. We sold our property. I got, because I'd been a council tenant, been in a council home. When I got eventually a council house, Maggie Thatcher had come out and give discounts on houses if you was a council tenant. And I remember having the fight with Lewisham Council, telling him at 21 that I'd been a tenant of theirs for 17 years. And I actually won the case in the appeal because I'd been a council tenant since the age of 4. So they ended up giving me the big discount. We kept the house, and then we moved down to Kent. We then sold the house, and with that money and my taxi money, we ended up buying the site. And I remember sitting there with £78,000 in stock. And when I first started that business, I remember watching me lose money hand over fist. Now, today it's not big money, but when you go down to £40,000 and you say to yourself, my God, if I get any lower, I'll have to give it up. But I kept pushing, I kept driving, I kept learning, and it's a thing for people today in the car business. Don't give up. Keep going. If you've got the passion and the drive, you'll get there. And that's what I did. And we went from there all the way on. We pushed, we drove, and we succeeded.
And Peter, you've said, all that time when you were providing cars for taxi drivers, did you actually have a light bulb moment when you thought, actually, the motor trade is something that I could do, as a sort of long-term career option?
Well, I think you can tell I'm quite a good talker. And because of being a good talker, in fact, it's quite a funny story. I was with a friend yesterday. I'm just building a nice villa in Marbella, and we ended up I bought a new Bentley, and I remember being in the shop only yesterday, and I ended up selling my friend a new Bentley for the Bentley man, and he just said to me, "My God, you're a salesman." And I actually sold the car for him, and I said, "I make sure I get a couple of freebies put in my Bentley when you service it."
And I mean, back in, you launched that business back in 1986. I mean, at what point prompted you to think that this had scale? You had that business. You'd gone through this. You continued to fight through the challenges that you had.
I mean,
What was the turning point to think, actually, I can scale this
so
business up?
what you need to understand about me, and if anybody knows me, because I'd been in a children's home and I'd been moved about, I never really went to school. So I'm dyslexic. I'm a very bad writer. I'm a very bad speller. I can count money. I can count numbers. It's the part of the good part of the business I'm in. But other than that, I'm a bit disabled and I'm half deaf. But what you need to remember is one thing. My son said to me the other day, and I've got a beautiful son. I'm very proud of him. He owns a company called JW Autos down in Stroud. Lovely boy. I remember him saying to me the other day, he said, Dad, I've not made as much money as you. I said, son, can you play football? He said, no. I said, can you sing? He said, no. I said, yes, you carry on selling cars then, son, because you're not going to make any money anybody else. And he laughed and he said, Dad, that's what I love about you. You're down to earth. You say it as it is and you tell it as it is. What you need to understand is when I built my business and I sold one car, then I sold 2 cars, then I sold 10 cars. What you need to remember is when the day when I was selling cars, main dealers wouldn't buy a car over 50,000 miles. They wouldn't put a car in their forecourt. I sold a lot of flash for no cash. I sold a 3 Series BMW for the same money as a Ford Sierra. The only difference was my BMW had done 60,000 miles. But in them days, we went to digital clocks and it didn't really matter because no one could see it. So I built the business on lots of flash for no cash. And even today, we still have that motto in our company. Lots of flash for no cash. Main dealer quality, but not price. And that has always been my motto.
And is that where, you sort of saw this opportunity in terms of thought, do you know what, I can do this on scale, I can do more of this, I can really get volume going through what I do?
The great thing about this, and I don't think anybody's actually stumbled on it, but do you know what BIG stands for? In my mind, it was named for one reason only, and it's what I think I've achieved today. And that is definitely dead simple. BIG, the biggest independent garage. BIG.
Yeah.
And that's why we called it BIG. Biggest independent garage. Big Motoring World, because we was the biggest BMW dealer in the UK for used. And that's why we had Big Motoring World, and then the BIG stands for biggest independent garage. So at a very age in our company, that's why we did that. Just so you know what BIG stands for.
Well, I mean, Peter, I didn't realize that. So biggest independent garage, that makes an awful lot of sense. So you actually rebranded your business in 2004 as Big Motoring World. You were operating from West Malling, and you did indeed become the biggest, largest independent BMW dealer in the country. So a couple of questions for you. Why did you focus on BMW? And also, did you ever have any sort of comments from BMW about the way that you were approaching the market as a BMW specialist?
Oh, absolutely, a million times. We was taken to court, issued with a court case by BMW because we called ourselves 10 in BMW in the early days. And in fact, they actually agreed for us to call ourselves Batchow Motoring World. And then they realised that Batchow Motoring World stood for BMW. So I thought it was quite foolish from them.
Yes.
So yes, we've had our moments with them, and we've had to deal with them. But I think they grew very known about us. Yes. Wait a minute. Yeah. I think they got to know us, and I think they realised who he was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what actually prompted that initial focus on BMW cars?
Well, I think that the case of them was that they seen who he was, and you've got to look at what actually happened. BMW went from 40,000 mile cars, and they now sell a lot more cars, don't they? They now sell cars up to 80, 90,000 miles. So you could say that we taught BMW a lesson when we were selling these cars over 40, 50,000 miles to have these cars in their showrooms. Because years and years and years ago, they didn't sell them.
Yeah.
Here was a company selling up to 500 BMWs a month, dominating the market in used. Did they look at me and say, well, we better sell higher mileage cars? I don't know. I can't claim to fame, but what I can say to you is they now sell them.
Yeah, and that goes back to your point about lots of flash for not a lot
For
of
no cash.
Yeah.
And
You know?
And Peter, I mean, you grew the business and from there, and how did you, because obviously, you've moved into other areas now in terms of not just that BMW
Okay.
focus. You now operate in
So,
other brands and stuff.
yeah, so what happened there, if you can imagine, a customer comes in, we have a very, very high retention rate of customers, and they would come in and say, Peter, I need to buy a different car for a BMW. Could you find me a Mercedes? Oh, Peter, my daughter's just passed her test. I can't put her into a BMW. Can you find her a Fiesta? So this sort of grew over a period of time where people said, we like you, we trust you, we have faith in you. We bought 4 or 5 cars for the family. My brother's bought a car, my sister bought a car. But I would like a Fiesta or a 4-wheel drive for my caravan. So that's how we ended up in multiple brands. And from there, we just grew the business. And, we now carry in excess of 8,000 cars in stock. So it's growing very rapidly. And we have a couple more things happening, which I can't speak too much about. But we've got a few things brewing in the pot, as you would say. And we will grow this business dramatically over the next year.
I'm not sure I've ever spoken to you, Peter, over the years when you've never had something brewing in the background that you're on with, but we'll keep a close eye on that one. But we in the introduction we talk about this investment in terms of this preparation centre. How big a game changer was it when you decided that you were going to open a prep centre? It's proved to be a game changer, I suspect, for you.
Well, what you need to understand is this. There's 3 parts of this trade. There's buying them correct, there's preparing them correct, and there's selling them correct. And if you can get them 3 parts correct, then you're going to win. Yeah? So to us, we knew what our future was. We wanted to be nationwide. We will be nationwide. So we had to find a place in the middle of the country. I remember walking around our 40-acre site, and I remember with Bob Rupert, our operations director, over 20 odd years, and he said to me, boss, we're never going to fill this. He now walks around the same prep centre and say, we need to find another one. Okay? And I remember when we walked around that site, we have 145 ramps, we have 12 MOT bays, we have about 9 or 10 paint booths. We diamond cut wheels, 26 sets of 4 diamond cut wheels and paint every 22 minutes. We call it the machine, the sausage factory. Many people that have seen it or been around it say that the scale and the size in the machine is out of this world leading. We had a very nice man called Steve from Cox fly over from America, and who's now took Sandy Schwartz's job. Yeah. Who's a lovely man before he retired.
He is, yeah.
And basically, Steve said to me, Peter, it's a machine. And he then pointed to my car, which was being charged up, because I drive a hybrid Bentley, and my number plate is Mr. Big. And the big fuss was him walking around that factory and having a picture of Mr. Big. And he's craved about it for a long time. So, the factory is there. It produces now 300 cars a day. We have Arctic lorries that come in and pick our cars up, which is branded and big. And what the action plan is, we need to be able to prepare between 10 and 15,000 cars a month, which is where we would like to scale up to. So that's what we are trying to achieve at the moment.
And Peter, just going back briefly, so you operated, this incredibly successful single site in West Malling. What actually gave you the confidence to think, well, we can open other operations, because that was followed by Bluebell Hill in 2018. So what actually led you to think, well, we can turn this into more of a group?
Well, it's quite a funny story, but how that came about, by this time I had made a few shillings, and we built a big house in Portsley. And we wanted to fence 23 acres of garden. And the guy that was the fencer, Malcolm, from the fencing company, said, "Do you buy property?" I said, "Yes." He says, "My friend's father is selling a site at Bluebell Hill." "How big is it?" He said, "Oh, it's about 20 acres with some forest." "Oh," I said, "take me to see it." And we ended up at Bluebell Hill in a man's house with 6 apple pies, Kipling's apple pies. And we did a deal there and then for £3 million, where I actually went to my briefcase, took out about £20,000, gave it to him, made him sign a receipt, and we'd exchanged. And that's how the life of Bluebell Hill actually took place. 6 apple pies, Kipling's, only the best, and £20,000 deposit.
We know what to
And
bring you
that's
next
how
time.
we bought Bluebell Hill.
We know what to bring you for next time with some apple pies. We'll be all right.
Absolutely. And that's how we opened that up. And we built it very quickly. Most big car dealers would take years. We built the site in 7 months. We filled it up with cars and we went again. And it was then we needed the big prep centre. Westmoreland sells in excess of 750 cars a month. Bluebell Hill sells in excess of over 1,000. We was running out of prep. We needed a prep centre. And this is when we moved to Peterborough. And from there, we then moved into Enfield.
And thinking a bit more recently with what we've faced, in the global market with the pandemic, since the expansion, rapid expansion, the 10-acre site, in terms of that preparation centre, you're talking about Peterborough in 2019, new retail sites in Enfield, North London in 2020, the acquisition of the 2-site SW car supermarket business in Peterborough in 2021. I mean, this was all against the backdrop of the COVID, the pandemic, the lockdowns, the challenges faced there. What were the challenges of growing so quickly, especially during this pandemic? Or do you see the opposite? Did you see it as an opportunity for the business to grow during that time?
So what you need to remember is 2 things. If you have faith in you, then people will have faith in you. Okay? The biggest challenge I have now is I'm 57 years of age. I am not 20. Okay? A lot of people keep thinking I'm 20. I'm 57. I'm getting old. I have the grey hair and the wrinkles.
Don't say that, Pete. I'm not that far behind you. I'm only 52. Come on, don't wish our lives away too soon.
I've got to be a beer belly, or you should say that an old, overage beer belly. I don't really drink. Anybody that knows me will tell you I've had odd Jack Daniels, and my favourite drink is Asti Spumante, which is very cheap. But I remember we did a deal with Fresh Stream last March. I was on the boat and we just done the deal. Millions upon millions of pounds come into my account. I was there with my son in Montenegro, and I remember the money come in. It was about 12 o'clock at night, and my son said to me, "Dad, we've got to celebrate." And I said, "Yes." So I said to my crew member, "Please bring me a bottle of the special stuff." This is my Asti Spumante, about £6 a bottle. And my son said to me, "Dad," he says, "you're the only man I know that's worth millions upon millions of pounds, and you have a bottle of Asti. Could you not have done any better?" And I turned around to the crew member and I said, "My son has a point. I'll have 2 bottles." And my son just turned when he said, "Dad, you are 100% carat gold." And that was the story of that. So when you go back to what we did, we have a vision. We have a vision of building a company to sell it. Our opportunity was we're making money. Let's grow this business. First of all, the business was for my son to take over. We bought 2 sites in Canterbury. He wasn't interested. We've let him do his own thing. And over the years, he now is in the car business and doing an absolutely amazing job. He's 24. He's got several houses now, and he's built up a little empire himself, which I'm very proud of. And he's done it himself, with no help from his father. So I said to him one day, "Do you want me to help you?" He said, "Dad, I've lived with the best trainer for 17 years. If I don't know now, I'll never know. Please leave me alone." And away he went, which I thought was an amazing thing for him to tell me, you know? So very proud of him.
Now, Peter, at the same time that you were growing the Big Motoring World business, adding sites, in September 2021, you launched Kazam, which was a very ambitious but unfortunately short-lived online car supermarket business. Can you tell us about the thinking behind the launch and what led to its closure in June last year?
Yeah. So you'll probably know a man called John Bailey who invested in Big. So he invested 12% of Big going back about 4 years ago. He was the international president of Cox. So he was always in America. And he'd been watching a company called Carvana grow his business. So he brought it to the table. I was actually up against it and said, "Now we'll grow Big." I've always been a retailer. And he convinced me one day to open up Kazam. We was in the middle of selling Big, was one of my things. And I built Kazam. We did it at the factory. We did everything there. And then as we were selling Big, the people who are buying Big said, "Peter, you have to separate these businesses." So the idea was that John Bailey then showed Kazam. I carried on with my Big transaction and worked on that. So John employed Michael Buxton and several other people from his past and from the boards. They took it over. It was doing very well. I had to stand away from it. And basically that was about 6 months before it closed. I then was told it was sinking. I then showed back up. A few of the members then left. And I ended up putting in millions upon millions of my own money just to pay most of the debtors back their money. So I actually spent millions upon millions of pounds paying off everyone to make sure that we did the right thing. And the business was then closed. And that was really it. But it was a John Bailey's dream. He was running it. He was, 50% shareholder with me. And then we had investors come in. And then that took me out being a 50%. And John Bailey and the investors sort of took it over. And that's how it went, really.
And do you think
very sad. But watch the space. Watch the space. There could be another one arising shortly.
Because Peter, I was going to ask you if that was, one of the reasons for the failure was because it was a digital business. It wasn't a retail business, which obviously you're so closely associated with the retail world. So from what you just said, it sounds though there is room in the market for a digital operation.
Let's make this perfectly clear. We do digital now. We take on average 40 to 50 deposits a day at the moment, online, for cars. So if you talk to me about all the online people in the market, they don't do anything different to what car dealers do today. The only difference is they got big valuations, got big money, and they don't do any different. One that comes to mind, I think, have just descaled their business down to less cars than what we will sell next year. So if you said to me, is there room? There will always be room. There always has been. We've been selling cars online for years and years and years. And I'm sure there's a lot of car dealers out there have done the same.
Yes.
There is no difference. The only difference is the city was told that it was a new thing when it's not a new thing.
Yeah.
Will it ever scale up? I don't know.
I mean, that segues very nicely into the next question. I mean, we talk about bounce back, but I'm not sure it's a bounce back. I mean, it's just a continual growth from yourself. But you recently launched the Big Wants Your Car, which is your trading buying service, and that was obviously launched in seems not that long ago, but 2021. And you've had some significant growth plans, and obviously this will support your volume growth plans that you mentioned earlier. And it was great watching some of your PR activity and watching you in that social space, and right at the offset you said about obviously what you share on platforms such as LinkedIn. But you went out buying 70 collection vans from Kazoo. Tell us about that part of the business and evolving, and what your plans are, because you've shared some significant growth plans for that area of the business.
Well, if you look at it, it's quite happy you say this to me. So we bought an office block. First time we'd ever had an office block, okay, in Gillingham, for 200 staff, okay? And we opened that up to run our Big Wants Your Car. And we've got 4 other products opening very shortly, which will be revealed over the next couple of months. We are actually filling capacity that we've just bought one of the head offices of Lloyd's Bank in Bailey Road in Gillingham, which will house 600 staff. And we're hoping to move into that in the next 6 weeks. That's the sort of growth we're looking for in our business. So watch the space. Watch the space. But what it does do is this. If you can't get the sweets in the sweet shop, then you have to go to the factory and buy them direct. That's what we've done. We're now buying direct. We're not paying absorbent commissions to the auction houses. Some of them I won't name, but as you watch me on LinkedIn, you'll see they have got their own online business and their own car sites. So I don't want to be putting money in their pockets. So I've gone and done it the other way. And we're making a very, very huge success of that. And there's a lot more to come. But we will not make a song and dance about it, like some people. And I'm sure that makes you chuckle.
I will say, well, we all know what you're talking about, but we'll say, because we'll stay
Now, finally, Peter, it's actually 37 years since you launched your first business. So you've turned Big Motoring World into one of the biggest independent supermarket groups in the UK. As we said earlier, you're just about to open a new site in Wimbledon. So we're just wondering what's next for Big the business that you can tell us about, and also what's next for Peter Waddell the man.
So I just bought a villa in a place called Chirablanca. I have another son of 5, and who I love him to death. We took him to school this morning, and we always have a little sweet in the car on the way to school. And we always get out with his cap and his bag, and we always give a sweet to the lollipop man. And we have a kiss, and then he goes to school, and we have a saying: up to the ceiling, down to the floor, 100 times around the world and a little bit more. That's how much I love you, son. And he goes into school, and there will be a day when I want to spend more time taking him to school more often and collecting him from school and doing more with him. So, I would say in the next 3 to 4 years, I think there's a saying: when you're in the ring and you win it, bow out as a winner. And I believe we are nearly there for where we are. We've now got a partner in the business. We've taken on some fantastic people. We took on Lawrence Vaughan as our chairman. We have Neil Hudson. You know, we have many of these guys that we've taken on in the business now. So we've grown a lot of big key players in the business. Lawrence Vaughan has been in the trade, I think, 40 years. Isn't as good looking as me, and I'm sure if he watches the podcast, he'll tell you different. So he come from Snitzer.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of listeners will know him from his Sytner days.
Absolutely, and he was the one that obviously helped build that business too. So we have got a very good guy in the business who knows about expansion because he helped Snitzer do their expansion. So, you know, we're looking at going up north. We're looking at about going in other big places. I can't say too much at the moment, but I can tell you that we will probably double in size in the next 18 months, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and especially in what you've already said about really thinking nationally, because at the moment the business is pretty much based in the southeast, stretching up to Peterborough. But you're thinking more nationally, aren't you?
Absolutely, we will end up all the way, as they say.
Up to the ceiling.
The good thing about it is, for me to go national, is I fly a helicopter, as most people will know. So for me to fly to Nottingham, Coventry, all the way up there is not a problem. It's a 40-minute drive or fly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, just to close off, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, you know, watching what you do, the developments within, you know, what you've been doing over the years. And I mean, you know, you said before about all these things that are coming. I think, you know, there's never a dull day in terms of what you do, and you're always thinking of the next big thing, the next opportunity. And I think, you know, you're right. The sector continues to be resilient against anything that's chucked at it. And it's, you know, it's in your blood once you're in the sector and you enjoy it. So, like I said about at the start, it'd be a different industry, but without you in it. And I'm sure you'll be in it for a long time yet, Peter. Forget this. 50,
I don't know about that.
Forget this 57 and being old. Let's
let's just look at that very closely. I haven't done anything. I'm just a CEO. It's the people on the ground. It's the people, the valeters, the receptionists, the technicians, the salesmen, everyone behind the back scene. They're the people that is growing this business. I'm just the CEO who, and I'll give you an example. Last Saturday, I was in Enfield, and I went to the local bakers and I bought 150 cakes for every one of my staff, from the people at the gate all the way through. And I got there on a Saturday at Enfield, and I put all the cakes out. I thought I'd done really proud. And then about 20 of my staff said, "Boss, we're in Ramadan." So I ended up going back down to Tesco's. I ended up getting some plastic bags with a bit of ribbon, putting the cakes in the bags, and when they finished work at 6 o'clock, handed them the bag with the cake in it and said, "When you finish Ramadan, here's a nice cake."
Yeah.
Which they were all laughing about on Sunday. So I don't always get everything right. Right. If that makes sense.
Right, so you've done all right so far, Peter, over the years. Don't you worry about that. I mean, it's just a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for giving up your time today, and you know, it's always a great pleasure talking about, you know, the background, where you've gone through, and your enthusiasm and your focus on what you do, why you do it, and the results that gives you. So, again, thanks for giving up your time today, and thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Peter.
You take care and have a great day.
Same to you.
And have a great weekend. I'll be working. Enjoy yourself.
Thanks, Peter. Talk to you soon. Thanks very much.
Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group. Philip and Curtis will be back with the week's big motor retailing headlines on Saturday. Live, on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with Philip and Curtis, come on the show or send a press release, then email them at motortraderadio@yahoo.com. You can also join the Motor Trade Radio, LinkedIn and Facebook groups, or follow the podcast on Twitter. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, bringing you all the chatter that matters.